are we doing? Is this the post-lunch slump we're feeling? Maybe we need to shake it up a little bit. So I'm Hilary. I am a part of the Amazon Web Services Sustainability Transformation Acceleration Team. Lots of big words, but STAT for short, because we need urgent action on these really important topics now. On my team, we get to work with really cool, pioneering customers, forward-looking leaders who really see sustainability for what it is, which is one of the most exciting commercial innovation opportunities of our time. So what I'm going to do today is go through some mental models, some strategic thinking, hopefully providing you with both evidence and inspiration and energy to really elevate the conversation of sustainability in your own organizations. We've heard a lot about reporting and regulatory requirements, and all of that is very important as well, but we're really missing the point if we're only focusing on that alone. So, while we have the UN definition of sustainability and everyone has their personal view of what sustainability is in their own homes, from an organization perspective, it is really around how do we ensure that our organizations are successful into the future, even as we're in a carbon-intense, resource-constrained reality, right? Many of our organizations, the way we've created value in previous decades, it's going to look quite different as we move forward. So for us, really keeping this framing in mind as we go forward in our journey today and onwards, this idea of being future fit, which is being sustainable, circular, inclusive, creating value, not just economic value, but value for social, environment, for a much broader range of stakeholders. So keeping that future fit framing in mind. So who here works as a sustainability change maker? Can I see a raise of hands? Okay, and then keep your hands up if you are also working across technology or in technology. Okay, cool, there's a few of us in here. So I just want to draw attention to this stat here, which is 62% of large EMEA organizations are going to be spending 5% of their IT budgets on sustainability. So it doesn't sound like a lot, 5%, but if you gauge kind of 4% revenue, that's really kind of $2 billion, $2 billion, euros, pounds. And so 5% really is 100 million pounds or euros. That's quite significant. And we're not just talking about this money being spent on sustainable IT or just looking at the sustainability of your IT assets. It's really that shift of IT for sustainability. So one of the first actions, your first next steps is, if you haven't made friends with your technology teams in your organization, let that be the first thing you do, and vice versa, right? And while we know that technology can do a lot to accelerate our sustainability goals, we've got lots of great case studies, and I'll touch on a few in a second. We're also seeing the flip side, which is the need for reporting and to innovate around sustainability is also accelerating customers' journeys to become digitalized faster. And I will talk a little bit more about that as well. But to really unlock the opportunity of sustainability and technology, we love mental models at AWS and at Amazon. So I'm going to share a few that's going to really help us get, again, into the right mindset to capture this opportunity, right? So really moving from bolt-on to built-in. We have a once-in-a-generation opportunity as all of our organizations go through that digital transformation to make sure that sustainability is at the heart of it. Yes, we know it's the right thing to do. It's also the smart thing to do. It's become a commercial imperative. Just by advancing the UN global goals, it represents a $12 trillion opportunity. Less harm, more good. The bar's been raised, right? It's not just about looking at the impact within your four walls. We're talking regenerative, we're talking net positive, and taking that value chain approach. And while we know that risk gets a lot of attention in the boardrooms, it's really going to be the opportunities that excite our leaders. So really being proactive and taking an opportunity-led approach. Managing past impacts, again, there's been a lot of focus on reporting, but really that's a means to the end, which is really making those impactful actions. So instead of looking at reporting on the past itself, also focus on how can we bring sustainability into forward-looking strategies. And finally, at AWS, we talk a lot about the sustainability of and in the cloud, but what I'm really excited to share and hopefully get more stories from in the future is what does sustainability through the cloud look like? So I'm going to give you guys one more framework just to get us all, our brains all working in this space before we dive into some examples to bring this to life. But this is the AWS Future Fit framework. It's a really useful framing that we've been using with customers and various organizations to really just get a sense of where they are today and where they want to go. What's their level of ambition looking like, right? So there are 4 levels of activity that increase in terms of complexity, innovation required, collaboration required, but also the impact, right? As you're going up these levels, you're trying to minimize the negative impact of just the nature of operating a business to really lean into what you are uniquely placed to do. What are your core competencies? Why do you exist? And how do we lean into unlocking the positive impact of that, right? So starting with level 1, this is where a lot of customers come to AWS, which is getting a better understanding of their IT footprint and how can we reduce this. And that was a great session with Paul talking about data, right? We've got solution architects that can work with our customers to make sure as you're migrating to the cloud, you're not just lifting and shifting data, you're really architecting that with sustainability in mind. We also have tools like a migration evaluator calculator where we calculate the carbon savings of migrating workloads from your on-premise data center to the cloud so that every IT decision also has that sustainability carbon business case, right? Level 2 is addressing, we've got more than just IT and carbon to worry about. This is waste, water, energy. This is talking about basically optimizations and efficiencies we're always looking for in our businesses. But through the lens of sustainability and super powered by technology, let's leave no stone unturned. So we've worked with Coca-Cola bottlers in Turkey where by digitalizing their processes, they were able to save 9% of water annually. So 9% of water annually for a Coca-Cola bottler, that's massive. Qantas, an airline, we were able to, by helping them better optimize their routes, save 1 to 2% on fuel. That translates to 50 million tons of carbon and also $40 million in terms of cost savings. So all of a sudden, these efficiencies have completely transformed the conversation. But where it's super exciting is that level 3-4 space, right? Where we move from seeing sustainability as a cost center, cost saving at best, to value creation. And this is where we see tons of novel sustainability solutions that we require to get to net zero and other global goals have not yet been invented. And so customers who are building solutions, we're really urging them to take that longer term view. Others in your industry are also going to require those solutions. So how can we build with that kind of commercialization, open sourcing, if you're feeling generous, in mind so that you can drive impact across your value chain, across your industry? And even though I've gone from level 1 to 4, sometimes we start conversations at that level 4 space where organizations, customers want to really paint and understand that picture. What does it look like for our organization to be future fit when sustainability is at the core of our business strategy? So that hopefully is something useful as you guys kind of go back to your organizations to assess, you'll have multiple activities across every level, and it'll be different stakeholders and teams driving this forward, but it provides a portfolio roadmap view of what we're really trying to achieve here. While we know technology can play a significant role, we know that we need to make sure that the impact and the footprint of that technology isn't outweighing the benefits, which is why we have tons of commitments both at the Amazon and AWS level to make sure this is a day in, day out job. So a few I'll highlight is the climate pledge. So this was co-founded with Amazon, and we've got over a 450 strong community where we're coming together to get to net zero by 2040. We're sharing best practices, we're sharing solutions, learning from each other, a lot of this cross-industry cross-pollination. We are also on the path to becoming 100% renewable powered by 2025. Again, this isn't just AWS data centers. This is Amazon fulfillment centers, offices around the world, so it's a big goal. Water is also a scarce and important resource for us. AWS, we've committed to be water positive by 2030, replenishing, getting water more into the communities we operate than we take out. And finally, research has really shown that by leveraging the efficiencies and high utilizations of AWS data centers, it can reduce the workload footprint for organizations by up to 80%. So, just to deep dive a little bit on, what I was saying before, which is really focusing on what's your bread and butter, what are your core competencies? So at AWS, it's data centers. And one example of how we're investing innovation into the core of what we do is that we design custom chipsets that go into the heart of our data centers that are more energy efficient. So AWS Graviton is an example of that, and it uses 60% less energy compared to other instances. And as we see the influx of Gen AI use cases, which I will touch on because it's a very hot topic, we also have things like AWS Trainium, AWS Inferentia, that helps train AI models and help inference. So again, where we don't need to reinvent the wheel and build from scratch, where we already have those clean and efficient foundations, it's really about starting from there. And maybe from the chip innovation to our servers, AWS, we're also employing circular economy principles to make sure that we are choosing, built environment construction materials that are low carbon, but also extending the lifespan of our data centers through predictive maintenance, all the way to making sure that we are designing for reusability and recovering and giving things a second life where possible, and also the traceability and security of that, which is really important. So just to turn it back to how we're helping customers accelerate in that same vein of let's not reinvent the wheel and spend too much time and energy in spaces where we already have solutions, so that we can really focus our efforts on where innovation is actually needed. And so that's why we have the AWS Solutions Library, where we have a whole host of vetted AWS as well as AWS partner solutions, right? Along with guidance for those who, you can either buy off the shelf, or if you have a more complex environment, that might require some customization. We also include guidance for builders to really use this. And these are kind of the 6 key priority, most common use cases we're seeing across the board. You can see why. Many of them are cross-industry. So that's one of the resources that's available today. But in terms of what I was saying, in terms of the customers who are really looking to build solutions, and I think these are customers, again, with much more complex environments, but also with resourcing, keeping that kind of idea of making sure you're not just investing this in your operational solutions, but thinking long-term how this could help others and perhaps generate new revenue streams. We also have a few data platforms and solutions, because a lot of these solutions will be driven by data. How do we maximize the use of this data and not have it just sitting around, as Paul was saying? So this is where we've got a 2-pronged data strategy. So if you are generating if you have a leader who's not quite sold on sustainability being a value creation route, and you're generating sustainability data that might be useful to others as they think about creating products and solutions themselves, a great way is to get that data on AWS Data Exchange for that passive revenue generation. But also, in developing your own products, that's where you can also access other people's data sets and purchase them. But if you have data that's meant to be more of a public good because it's going to really help advance scientific research in this space, we also have the Amazon Sustainability Data Initiative, which is really powered by the Open Data Sponsorship Program, where organizations with large data sets can host with support so that it can expand access to scientists, academia, and others alike to really drive progress. So it's that kind of right thing to do, smart thing to do data approach. And finally, cherry on top, we have, of course, folks use Amazon.com. We also have the AWS Marketplace, where the solutions that exist today can be accessed. And so, a lot of the customers and partners we're working to innovate with, we really want AWS Marketplace to be the destination where they're able to be successful and scale and have that intended impact. So, yes, so given this topic is everywhere, maybe I'll just give a very quick overview. Folks have been hearing a lot about generative AI, but it's really that stream down from general AI, right? When we talk about AI, there's a range. Folks are either thinking about AI for automation all the way to how does it completely transform our experience interacting with data and insights. But really, it's a subset, machine learning, deep learning, these are subsets of artificial intelligence that have now paved the way for generative AI. And maybe for me, what's most compelling about Gen AI is for the first time, we're able to break down the barriers between human speech and computer science to really increase access to technology tools to be able to bring insight and data to life, right? I think that's where it gets really, really interesting because all of a sudden we're expanding these tools in ways we haven't been able to do before. And I think, one of the key things to really keep in mind is you can't just go from zero to Gen AI, right? There's a data foundation that is required. And that data foundation has to be data of quality, data that's well architected and well organized, and it's got to have integrity. So when folks are thinking about Gen AI, it really, really starts with that digital transformation, and again, that opportunity to make sure sustainability is at the heart of it. So what I'll do is maybe I'll just give a few quick examples to bring some AI use cases to life. These are things, again, that are happening now closer than you think. Maybe I'll start with ESG reporting and insights. We've heard a lot about this over the last couple days, but let's not just think about it at an organizational level, but at an industry level. So we are working with financial services, banks, stock exchanges, to really look at the power of AI to not just assess the ESG performance of their own firm, but across the portfolio of sometimes tens of thousands of customers to really summarize and get a sense of where are we at? What are the recommendations we can provide? What are some of those financial products that we can proactively bring to those customers so that we can help them close the gap while at the same time provide a better customer experience? Packaging. Packaging is a topic that's near and dear to our heart at Amazon. But we've been using AI for many years. There is the packaging design engine that our teams use to help us identify the most efficient packaging format, right? And then also take on customer feedback to be able to make those iterations to continually improve that system. Anyone working in retail, CPG, food? Yes? Cool. So, returns. Returns is one of those things that cost money and also can multiply your carbon footprint. So it's a big headache for a lot of retail businesses. As a result, it's really looking at how AI can be leveraged to detect defective, damaged, unfit items before they get sent out and returned. And what we found at Amazon was AI was able to better identify damaged goods 3 times more accurately than the human eye. So we've really been applying that so that we can catch that and mitigate that carbon emission stream early on. We're also doing it at Amazon Fresh, where we have store shelves being monitored for fruits and vegetables, as well as Amazon.com to find that perfect fit, making a recommendation. So again, shoppers are doing less returns. And maybe product carbon footprint, that's interesting as well, but anyone here working in hospitality? Okay, well, for your hospitality friends, a really cool example is we're seeing the reformulation of recipes, right? A lot of food and beverage hospitality organizations, a significant part of their footprint will be sourcing meat and dairy products, right? So being able to leverage AI to bring in data, whether it's weather-related data, what's seasonal, what's local, what's the weather going to be like, to understand better purchasing decisions, to minimize waste and also, support natural ecosystems. AI has been a really interesting application to how do we help skip those steps so that we can help chefs maintain their creativity and not have to think about all of these things before they go into reformulation. So just kind of like little things that we're starting to already see organizations explore. So I think, across some of these examples, even the retail example of spotting defects, really thinking about anyone in the manufacturing space, right? We're seeing the use of computer vision and AI, machine learning being applied so that folks are spotting out defects, diverting and minimizing waste, and tackling embodied carbon. So it's really, really thinking about technology and IT for sustainability. So now we're going to take a little bit of going from these AI use cases to a much bigger scale in terms of looking at how AWS is working with organizations, democratizing AI so that they can use that to accelerate their goals, and this includes the public sector. So we know that forests are very important carbon sinks, right? 80% of animal species, life on land, depend on forests. 1.6 billion livelihoods depend on forests, and yet 10 million hectares are getting cut down each and every year, right? Deforestation continues to be a challenge and represents a worldwide supply chain risk, right? And in Brazil, we're seeing some of the highest rates of deforestation. So that's why AWS, we've partnered with the government of Para in Brazil to help them look at developing a tool that's AI-enabled to help tackle deforestation and ensure traceability in supply chains. 90% of deforestation is directly, indirectly linked to agriculture. Most of that is soy, cattle, beef. So those are the 2 areas we've been focusing on. So the Brazilian Forest Code, we all know there is definitely a very important role that legislation plays. So the Brazilian Forest Code is the main legislation that regulates like nature conservation on private lands. So the mandate is for them to be able to understand whether there are native vegetations that should be conserved or other vegetation that should be suppressed for natural resource management. Enforcing the forest code is another story, right? So there's about 7 million rural properties that are part of their registry right now. And with every single registry comes tens, sometimes hundreds of different data points, right? Is it cropland? What kind of native vegetation are we looking at? Are there bodies of water? You know, there's so many different data points that it becomes an almost impossible spatial data problem. And also, a lot of these requirements are looking at the farm level, right? So if you think about that, it's a massive spatial data problem at a massive scale in a very, very precise location. While we have seen a lot of initiatives trying to tackle this challenge of traceability, transparency, and enforcement and compliance, the reality is where we're landing is a lot of private certifications, which definitely has a role to play, but you know, as it stands, it's quite expensive. There's not a lot of transparency, and also it only covers a very small part of your supply chain. It's very limited to certain farms. So that scope of trying to get that full value chain view is problematic. So what exactly were we looking for in terms of a solution? We needed something that was transparent, traceable. There's a lot of public open data going into it, so it really needs to be a public tool, even if there is a role for private certification. It needs to be cost effective. How can we be expecting farmers to be paying these extortionate amounts for assessments and audits? That's just not realistic. And then also, having that fully traceable platform that can be integrated back into national requirements. So that's kind of like high level in terms of really kind of outlining what are the functional requirements of this solution. But again, easier said than done. Right now, the Sello Verde, which is called, translates to the green seal, this is a solution. Right now, it integrates 35 different public data sets, right? These include things like indigenous conservation areas. It includes, things like cattle movement, all the way to environmental embargoes, forced labor practices. It takes in a whole host of different data sets to be able to do that analysis and understanding of where compliance is happening and where it needs a lot more work. So it starts to provide an evidence-based roadmap for governments, suppliers, and buyers who are all under pressure to be tackling this. It gives them an evidence-based view on what they need to do, where they need to go, and also the levers, potentially, to be able to make that impact and shift. So right now, there's about, I think it's like 20 million hectares that are being automatically monitored. And it's really in working with best practices, working in partnership and collaboration with governments, farmers, suppliers, and also tapping into what I was mentioning before. We had the Amazon Sustainability Data Initiative, again, taking data there so that it can expedite and accelerate impact, and also tapping into Amazon's Right Now Climate Fund. And that is a $100 million fund focused on nature-based solutions in helping us tackle nature, biodiversity, climate change as well. And right now, there's a typo here. So right now, we're looking at 3.4 million hectares to be restored only in the Paris state in Brazil. If we were to expand this solution to the rest of the country or different states, there's a potential of 109 million hectares to be automatically monitored, right? And what that translates to in terms of carbon impact is about 123 tons of carbon reduced per year to get to 739 by 2030. So this is, again, focusing on just mostly cattle and soy supply chains. So you can imagine the scale and the impact looking at other commodities as well. And I think this is, a slight deep dive into, we've gone from some of those operational type applications of sustainability to something that is of such massive scale somewhere the other side of the world. But we don't need to go that far. For folks who are based in London or here visiting in London this week, the Natural History Museum is one of our partners at AWS. We are working with them to really better understand UK nature, natural nature and biodiversity, right? When folks who've been, who's been to the Natural History Museum? Yeah, it's just such a cool place, right? What you don't realize is in the basement, there's a treasure chest of, all these creepy crawly things in jars, 80 million artifacts that hold very valuable information in terms of what nature biodiversity looked like pre-human intervention and what that could look like now post, and to be able to set those future goals in terms of how we better manage nature and biodiversity. So for those who, have time to go to the Natural History Museum, the next time you go, it's gonna be with that fresh perspective of like, wow, this is such a big undertaking in terms of digitalizing all of these artifacts, but in doing so, in terms of both the environmental DNA or the environmental and visual DNA of these artifacts actually hold a lot of information, and in terms of all the solutions around that space as well. And so, final call to action or questions for you guys to take home, a bit of homework. First of all, if you're in sustainability, you don't have a techie friend, go find one in your organization and see what's up, vice versa. And then also, what are some of your biggest challenges right now when it comes to sustainability beyond reporting, right? Think about this in terms of broader business objectives. What's keeping your board up at night? That's where your biggest opportunities will lie. What would make it much easier? And what do you wish you could do that you couldn't do before? I think, have a think of those questions, and we invite you to come co-innovate that future fit version of your organization with us, hopefully to build that more sustainable and technologically empowered future together. Thank you very much.